In 1 Corinthians 10, Paul is talking about things that are permissible but are not expedient. He actually is elaborating on the same principle in 1 Corinthians 8, 9, and 10. If you read the whole thing, he's basically making the same point. What's the point? The point is that even though he's no longer under the law, he's now under the law of love, which is a much more accurate and real and it's a much more accurate, real, comprehensive law than all of the other lower laws that he used to live under and that any of us have lived under. The law of love is where perfect accuracy is found as far as laws go. This is why he understood that the old law was no longer the dominant equation. It was no longer running his life. Because he understood, I think, from what I can tell of his writings, that love was now the dominant law, which he says in Romans 13. He said, right? And Jesus even said, to live in love with God and to live in love with your neighbor is the law and the prophets. This is the law and the prophets. Why? Because the law of love is accurate. The law of love is perfect. The law of love takes into account every single factor possible in any situation possible with any person possible and makes the absolute right call. That's what the law of love does. That's the law that God lives by. That's the law that Jesus lives by and lived by when he was here on earth. That's why Jesus could still be Jesus and he could still be the Lord and still not obey the lower laws. Right? For example, in John 8, when they brought to him the woman caught in adultery, if he would have kept the law, he and they would have stoned her. But he was operating on the law of love, and he said, no, we're not going to stone her, but we're still going to stop the sin, but we're going to save her life as well. That's what he did. That's what the law of love does. The law of love is perfect. We are called to live in the law of love. Okay? This is the new law, right? A new law I give you. Jesus said a new commandment. He didn't say a new law. He said a new commandment I give you, that you love one another. Why? Because the law of love is perfect. When we live in true love, real comprehensive love, God's real comprehensive love, we act and we make decisions of what we do and don't do out of that love, not all the lower laws. The lower laws were attempts to reach the law of love. But when we live in the law of love, we determine everything by love. Is this good for me? Is this going to harm me? Self-love. Is this good for that person? Is it going to harm that person? Love for them. Is it good for this person over here? Is it going to harm them? Is it good for someone in my family? Is it going to harm someone in my family? Is this good for my husband or my wife? Or is it going to hurt them? Is this good for the people across the street who are watching my actions? Right? Even though it might be permissible for me to do, they might not think so. So I subject my own freedom for their sake. Which brings us back full circle to that 1 Corinthians 8, 9, and 10 principle. That's the principle that Paul was teaching. That is a principle of the law of love. That if something I am free to do is not sinful for me, but it's somebody else thinks it's sinful, then I don't do it for their sake. Right? Out of love for them. That's the whole point of 1 Corinthians 8, 9, and 10. And he repeats it again in Romans 12. The typical Christianese term is matters of conscience. Matters of conscience is a lower term The real terminology is the law of love. The law of love governs everything, including every other lower law. So sometimes lower laws get subjected and bypassed because we're living by the law of love now. Law of love does what is absolutely best for every person all the time in every situation, considering every factor. So the balance between what is permissible and what is expedient that Paul was talking about in Romans 10 is love. Love is always the determining factor for everything we do now. This is where God is calling us to. We're no longer under all those old laws, right? All those old laws sometimes achieved love. They tried, right? It was a rudimentary blueprint. Hebrews 10:1, right? It says that they were a shadow. The old laws were a shadow. But the substance is the law of love, right? Those old shadows could never achieve what God achieves living by the law of love, and he calls us up to join him in the law of love. Thank you and have a nice day.